With this roster, getting this team back on track should be easy.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download that Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Look, we are in the moment right now where Kansas State is not in a great spot whatsoever. We have coaches telling coaches and administration telling certain people to delete things off social media because of the way that they're talking about the team. It's just an interesting viewpoint of where we sit at 1-3, a team that should be where I talked about this offseason. I know I'm not the only one that talked about this Kansas State team being a Big 12 contender. Are they a Big 12 contender? Should that still be the narrative? I want to talk about that on this show today. Also, in order to get this team back on track, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's a very simple fix, in my opinion. It's just, can they get to that point? And that's exactly where I want to start off with today. It's the running game, period. You just have to run the football effectively. Has that happened at all this season? No, it hasn't. Not one bit, actually. And that is something that just needs to get fixed. I was going back, listening to some of the things I said after the post game, listening to some other things that a couple other people said on 3, go Power Cat. I listened to the post game of Chris Klieman. I rewatched the game. And the thing that stuck out to me, and we just talked about in yesterday's show, Chris Klieman says that he has to reevaluate the fact that maybe there's just not enough talent on this team. I refuse to actually believe that. I sat back and looked through that earlier today and all last night, and I refuse to believe that, because we sat here, if you're an everydayer, you joined me, we sat here all offseason, and we talked about how incredible this team could be, where the entire national media landscape was saying this team is a 9-3, 10-2, 11-1 team and should find themselves in Arlington. You don't do that. You don't have outsiders thinking about that if you don't believe in the talent. That's why I refuse to believe that the talent isn't there, because it absolutely is. I believe in Avery Johnson. If he's utilized properly, I believe in this offense, the way it was built up, bringing those guys in the portal, great receiver portal. Maybe the offensive line isn't living up to its hype. That's something we can get into in just a minute. And the secondary, they did have some big losses going to the NFL draft, but overall, if they're only utilized a certain amount of portion on the field and not being out there for the entire second half like they were for Army, it's not completely terrible. It's doable if the rest of the team can do their job as well. That's my entire viewpoint right now. It is not a talent issue. If we lose to UCF, and we lose to UCF because it's play calling, and play calling was great, something that hasn't happened yet this season, then maybe I'll change my tune. But I was starting to drift that way on yesterday's episode, and I'm pulling myself back today. It's not a talent issue. Is it still discipline and execution? Something that Chris Klieman said a couple of weeks ago? Sure, I can see that. But I'm going to go back to pointing the two fingers yet again. It's not just on the players. It is absolutely, and might be even more, I'm going to lean even heavier on the coaching side. The play calling has been very bad. When we talk about trying to be customized and trying to be more creative with the football, how about we try to be more creative where we actually make some passing plays? Pass the sticks. Pass the first down marker on 3rd and 4th down. Let's start for that for a change. Newsflash. That's how you move the sticks. That's how you get a first down. Get a little Mike McDaniel in here. The way that you win the game is that first you have to win a game and then not lose games. That's how you win the game. And I know that sounded crazy, but that's actually what the Miami Dolphins head coach just said a couple days ago. Look, the way that I see this football team right now, are they still a Big 12 contender? Statistically, yes. Realistically, no. But You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have one of the greatest motors in college football. But with Matt Wells running this play calls, and it sounds like since we're now sitting at Tuesday evening, so we're recording this podcast Tuesday evening, we haven't heard any news from Chris Klieman, haven't heard any news from a public statement from Kansas State Athletics that they're making a change at the coordinator position. So it sounds like we are going with Matt Wells, Joel Klanderman. We're going with them for the UCF game. Now, time can change, but I mean, the closer you get the game time, then obviously that's not going to change getting closer. You want to do it probably quick so you can adjust and prepare. So it sounds like we're going with these coordinators for this one in a week and a half's time. Matt Wells needs to stop putting Avery Johnson in a car with square wheels. That's my problem here. Avery Johnson does a great job when he scrambles outside the pocket, when he's able to take off and run. Matt Wells, I said it this entire offseason, Matt Wells in his past college career life, when he was the head coach at Utah State, excelled when he had Jordan Love at quarterback because he got to utilize the play action. You can't do that with Avery Johnson if you have no run game. If your run game is non-existent, then there's no such thing as a play action, because what defense is going to be afraid of a run that's not there, of an offensive line that can't make that push past a yard of the line of scrimmage, something that's been a yard to a yard and a half worse than last season's offensive line. The run blocking on the offensive line is absolutely atrocious. Now, you can go into the data points, you can go in the PFF, and you can say, well, they're doing great on the passing. But if you're a one-dimensional team in the Big 12, and we're not even talking Big 12, with the exception of the Arizona game, you played, well, I guess, Iowa State, but the games that you lost, Army, should have been North Dakota, those games where you should have bullied them on the offensive line, you didn't. And then you became a one-dimensional team, only throwing the football because you had to. And the only game you won was a last-second drive by Avery Johnson. You got to find a way to start being bully football. You got to find a way to be a bully on the offensive line. Some of these guys coming in from the transfer portal, JB Nelson, there's one of them. Honorable Big Ten Player of the Year a few years ago. If you go look at his data points on the offensive line, especially in the run game, it's atrocious. It's terrible. Running game, he's got a 52.7, the worst offensive lineman on the team. He only played 26 snaps against Arizona because his pass block was even worse. He was the worst offensive lineman on the field on Friday night. He had a 35.4 in pass block. This is the guy that came over late. I understand that he came over late, but he came over from Penn State. It's not like he came over late and was making a jump from FCS to the Power 4. You could make the argument that he made a downgrade if you really want to make that argument. Going from Penn State, who has always been seen as having one of the best offensive lines in the country, at least for the last decade. Kansas State's usually in that same category as well, but not this year. Not this year whatsoever. The pass blocking seems to be working over and over again. Andrew Leingang, Sam Heck, John Pastore doing a great job, but they're not getting enough push, this entire offensive line, to move the running game. And that's something that has to change. It starts with Matt Wells. Then it goes to Avery Johnson, goes to those offensive line and those running backs. That's the umbrella that makes it happen. You can put the wide receivers in there too because they have to block. And there's been some really good blocks. Tibbs has had an excellent season so far at run blocking. I've seen great run blocks from Tibbs. He's a team player. He's probably turned out to be the best portal addition other than Luis Rodriguez, the kicker, in my opinion. Definitely on the offensive side, Tibbs has shined. Lincoln Cure, we saw him hop in there on Arizona on Friday night. Didn't get a reception, but he made a couple of really good blocks. I think that's important. It shows you're a team player right off the bat. You're willing to do what it takes. But now we're at this special moment in time where we've already played 4 games. Some players haven't played all 4 games. But when you get to that 4-game mark, you can decide if you want a red shirt and move on with your season. It's a crazy feeling. Crazy feeling for Kansas State right now. Something they're not used to in the Chris Klieman era, in the Bill Snyder era. They're not used to this. This is one of their worst starts in a very, very long time. And it could get worse. Not saying that UCF is a world beater, but I thought Arizona was going to be a down and out team this year. We'll see what it's like against UCF. I've brought up that I still think that this team can somehow magically find themselves into Arlington because statistically it's still there. But should I stop that narrative? Let's talk about that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. So with football being back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. I mean, with Thursday Night Football coming up, Bills, Dolphins, I mean, what perfect time. Josh Allen, I heard, is wearing a visor. That sounds pretty cool. Maybe that means he's going to throw 3 touchdowns. I'd throw him my props, and it's probably easy to give Tua with like 2 interceptions. I'd probably throw him in there as well because Miami looks really, really bad this year. So there's just 2. You can do up to 2 to 6 on Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Should we stop the count, or in this case, stop the narrative about Kansas State potentially being still a Big 12 contender? It sounds like the simple answer is yes, absolutely you should. You're 1-3. Why is this even a conversation, Christian? But then you can dig deeper and you can look that, well, you're really only technically 0-1 in the conference. Those last 3 games, now that you can no longer will be an at-large bid in any way, shape, or form for the college football playoffs, because you do have 3 losses to your name. 9-3 Alabama didn't get it. 9-3 Kansas State's not getting it if a loss to Army. Now you can only think about being 0-1. You're not really 1-3 anymore. You're 0-1. And that's why I keep saying statistically, yes, there's still absolutely a chance to get to Arlington. But realistically, no, because you've seen what this football team's looked like over the past month. And it's been rough. And it's just not being led the way it needs to be led. This offense has all the potential in the world. I mean, we're talking about the same offense pretty much than what we saw in the Rape Bowl game against Rutgers. And that offense was on fire. Now, how much does it mean to lose Dylan Edwards? Obviously a bunch. It's huge to this offense. It's completely just sucked the life out of them. But they have to find a way to overcome. Hopefully a week and a half of off time makes Dylan Edwards ready to go, and he can battle through and play for UCF and play for the rest of the Big 12 standings and Big 12 season. But I wouldn't hold your breath because he's been out for so long. You have to find a way to pivot. In the world of college athletics, when it comes to NIL, when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to adding people in the transfer portal, you've seen certain college coaches leave the spectrum because they didn't like the way that it was heading in the direction. Nick Saban's one of the easiest ones to bring up in this conversation. But what I've always said about that is that if you don't want to do this, and that's fine. I mean, especially when you're a multimillionaire like Nick Saban, he could find a coach and he could be the coach tomorrow to someplace, anywhere, and people will pick him up. I'm sure Virginia Tech is probably going to give him a call and say, hey, are you interested? Either way, the way I've always looked at that is adapt or die. You have to adapt to the new things that are presented in front of you. This is a life thing too. It's not just football, but we're talking football here. You have to adapt or you miss the boat. And in this case with the Kansas State offense, it just never happened. They were dealt a hand in Dublin before their offense even took the field of Dylan Edwards. Fumbles the punt return, muffs it, gets hurt. He doesn't see a single snap on offense until last Friday night, where he only had 4 carries before having to go out in the game again. Since then, though, there has really been no truly adaptation of this offense. They have not found a way to fill the void of Dylan Edwards, and you can't say that the game plan is too filled on Dylan Edwards. Maybe for the first half of Iowa State, you could say that. And I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But you knew heading into the locker room in Dublin that you didn't have Dylan Edwards for the rest of the game. You knew every other week moving forward, you didn't have Dylan Edwards. And then you knew that you were going to probably have him on a snap count in Arizona. And he fell out probably a little sooner than you expected. So none of these game plans, except the first half of the Iowa game, the one you planned and prepared for all offseason, involved Dylan Edwards. That just shows that there was a lack of execution, something Chris Klieman said, and a lack of discipline on this team. But again, you might think that he was talking about the players. But it makes a lot of sense if you can point that finger and turn it right around and say, no, that's the coaches not doing their job correctly. The execution is just not there on this coaching staff right now. And that is the reason this team is 1-3. But after my long event here, go back to the original topic I was talking about. Arlington is still a possibility, folks. And I continue to bring it up. And a couple people have commented on Lockdown K-State. Talk to me on social media, on Twitter X. And you can find me there, Lockdown K-State. You can also find my personal account, Christian S. Rao. Check it out. Talking college football, talking NFL all the time. That's just, I'm a sicko when it comes to sports. But someone brought it up to me and they said, you got to stop talking about this Big 12 narrative. Hopefully we make a bowl game. Like that's got to be the new direction of this team. And I'm not ready to do that yet, at least for this off week. The next time we have a reaction show for a post game after we play UCF, if that becomes a loss on the schedule, you'll never hear me bring up Arlington again the rest of the season. If it's a loss to Baylor or it's a loss to Texas Tech or Utah, and that's the only loss on the schedule, I can live with that. But I cannot live with a loss to UCF because UCF is meant to be probably the easiest team left on the schedule for Kansas State. Maybe Oklahoma State, you can make an argument as well, but who knows what they'll look like towards the second half of the season. Big 12 teams are known to change and turn things around in the second half of the season. Look at Kansas, look at Baylor last season. Perfect example. Right now, you know what you have in UCF. They haven't figured it out yet. They haven't lost, though, either. But I still think that's the easiest team they have left on the schedule. And this is no knock to UCF. I think Scott Frost is going to get them right sooner than later. But when you look at the rest of the schedule, like this week, Texas Tech and Utah playing against each other, big noon Saturday, two ranked opponents. Iowa State taking on Arizona, a team that two teams you've already lost to this season. Great Big 12 games coming this weekend if you are planning on actually watching college football, unless you're going to decide to hide in the closet instead because you know you don't have to watch Kansas State and you want to avoid it. It might be best for your psyche. I completely understand. Either way, I'm going to hold on to this hope, dare I say, for one more college football week of Kansas State. If we have a reaction show where we are embarrassed again by UCF, then I promise that narrative will go out the window. And we'll start talking about what's next. With this coaching staff, can they make a bowl game? Because that'll be the next thing. If they lose to UCF, then 6 wins is a real huge concern. And you might even say 6 wins is a concern right now. But I'm not there yet. But I'll tell you, I'm teetering. I'm real dang close. Speaking of some of these other teams that are playing this weekend, let's dive into that. Let's talk about some of those other teams. And then, of course, let's get a little bit more into some of the grades that we saw from Arizona on both the offense and defensive side to finish up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Game Time. College football is back. Oh boy, do we know it. And I couldn't be more excited. Even though we're 1-3, I'm excited that college football is back. I love sports. I hate the sadness of summer when we only have just baseball in the air. I'm glad that we got it all back. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually, getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. You just don't want that. You want to make sure you have what you need and make sure you have an extra cash on the side to get that hot dog and a nice frosty beverage at the game. That's why I use Game Time. It's the app I've used for quite some time. It gives you advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score a last-minute tickets at the best price with no surprise fees either. What you see is what you pay, and you can find some tickets for your favorite college football games for as low as $25. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Let's go a little bit into this Arizona game, just a little deeper here. We're going to dive into Kansas State's positional groups over this week and next week. We're going to do a full breakdown with UCF next week as we get into game week. This is one of those kind of lame duck kind of weeks because of the bye week, and it's not one to be proud of, right? We didn't get a press conference from Chris Klieman, kind of keeping to himself, and still such an interesting way. I call it a cop out. I'm gonna call it a cop out. Not being kind of, I don't know if I want to use the word afraid, but not answering questions in the media is something that is interesting. He wants to probably silence the noise inside the locker room. A player-led program, might I remind you? We'll see if that changes once a game week comes around against UCF. Remember, that game is next Saturday. They do have an off week this week, and UCF, they have North Carolina on the schedule. North Carolina hasn't looked the greatest. They didn't look very good against TCU, so we'll see if they can turn that around against UCF with Bill Belichick, obviously, as their head coach. That'll be a fun game to watch if you're paying attention to it. UCF did have a quarterback battle in the offseason, so there's still some fun things to pay attention to with UCF. And of course, you can check out Mike Giddens over on Locked On UCF. He got you covered over there. If you want to get a little bit of a taste on what's happening for the next opponent, you can make that your second listen of the day today. But let's dive in real quick before we head into something else and talk about the offense still for the grades against Arizona. And we'll kind of go out on this. I'm still going to give, although the offensive line wasn't amazing by any stretch of the imagination, John Pastore is still doing outstanding. He has easily been the best offensive lineman all season long. What we heard from Chris Klieman this offseason about how he has turned into being one of these great offensive tackles. And what's crazy is that George Fitzpatrick was actually planning to start over him. It's crazy to think of when we eventually get him back, how this offensive line could turn out and shape out to be. Hopefully it's not too late. But John Pastore has done a great job at left tackle. His grades, according to PFF, were a 64.8 overall offensive grade. His pass block was a 71.7, and he had a 60 in run block. I think that was actually his worst grades of the season, but still good enough to be the top offensive lineman on the team this past week. And that is true. It was actually North Dakota overall offensive-wise was his lowest grade by a point. But when you look at it for the pass block and run blocking grades, he actually was improved. So whatever the extras were to make the offensive grade go down, North Dakota was technically worse, but Arizona kind of took the cake there. But either way, John Pastore, I'm giving him, one of the best keys for this offense to take next step forward. The rest of this offensive line needs to look and see what he's doing. Sam Heck's doing good. Line gang's doing fantastic on the pass block. His run game is rough, but overall, doing a pretty good job there. Jace Brown has the highest offensive grade according to PFF, went over Avery Johnson. He had 42 snaps and he had a total offensive grade of 76.8 and had the highest run grade, go figure, on the team with a 69.4 with that huge 70-yard rush to open up the second half. When you talk about being creative, if that means putting more Jace Brown into the conversation, then so be it. I mean, feed one. Do what you got to do to feed one. If you are afraid of Avery Johnson getting hurt because you don't have Dylan Edwards and you need to make some kind of splash, Jace Brown's the answer. Now, I don't think you need to be fearful of Avery Johnson because I don't think you have the opportunity or the choice to do so when you're staring at 1-3. But either way, I mean, if you find a way to utilize both of them, Avery Johnson and Jace Brown, that alone gave people hope this offseason when Jace Brown stuck around. If you remember, if you were paying attention right before the bowl game, there was a lot of rumors that Jace Brown was potentially entering the portal. He was potentially not going to play in the bowl game. That all got squashed like hours before they played against Rutgers around the Christmas time period. And then he was one of the players that never left. Retention. That was a huge thing. That was a huge thing for Kansas State this season. Finding the way to get them involved. And as I mentioned earlier, making sure Matt Wells doesn't drive this car with square wheels is super important. Super important. On the defensive side, let's talk about that real quick. We haven't really talked much defense. We're going to probably dive into that more on a later episode this week. Malcolm Alcorn Crowder only had 16 snaps, but had the top defensive score. It was nice just seeing him out there. period. I mean, only having 16 snaps, got to get him out there more, but had a 74.7 defensive grade, was great on the pass rush, great on rush defense, did a really good job there. Quay Moss and Zayshawn Rich followed suit, both with 72s. Zayshawn Rich played 83 of the 83 snaps. So, I mean, if you have any questions about if he is not the true number one corner and whether you agree that he should be there or not, this entire coaching staff has full faith in him. He didn't leave the field once. 83 out of the 83 snaps. And put that in perspective, defense played 83 snaps. The offense only played 53. So there we go again, just like the game against Army, where the defense just was on the field way too long. That's something that one of the keys to the game, I can already tell you. For UCF, that will be one of the keys to the game. Get the defense off the field. Absolutely has to happen. For a coverage grade, VJ Payne stepped up this week. 72.2 on a coverage grade, probably his best week of the season. There's definitely been some talks about VJ Payne in the past about how Coach Klieman thinks that he has been pressing, and they found a way to fix that, it looks like. So hopefully he can move it forward and take care of things there as well. I want to see more from the pass rush. Not saying that it wasn't there, but I just want to see more. And I think we can get there for sure. He had 3 sacks in this game. Bates had 1, Cheedy had 1, and Damian Ilalo had 1 as well. But we can get more. We can get more from this team. This is a team that did pretty good in sacks last season. You had a couple double-digit sacks last year. You're not anywhere close to that at the moment when you're looking at trends. You got to find a way to improve that pass rush. I know they switched to the 4-man front this year. I know that we've had some comments in the past on our postgame asking if switching back to the 3-3-5 would be a better choice. I'm not sure if I'm ready to make that move yet because of that 4-man front hasn't always been bringing the most pressure, bringing 4 instead of 3. And I don't know if the defensive coordinator Klannerman trusts his secondary enough to be able to blitz some of those other players, although it did work pretty well in the past. So we'll pocket that conversation until after the UCF game about what defensive formation they should move to finish off the year. We got so much more for you coming up the rest of the week. We're going to dive deeper into this game. We're going to dive deeper into some of these positional breakdowns. We're going to do a lot more on this show. We're going to dive deeper into some of these other Big 12 games that are coming out this weekend because it's a perfect time since, we don't play this week. And then next week, it'll be all about UCF in game week. We'll probably have a conversation with Mike Giddens from Lockdown UCF and a bunch of good stuff here coming up on the channel. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to hit that bell as well if you're listening on YouTube so you don't miss a single episode. We're dropping at least one every single day. We're not going away, even though there's a bye week. We're going to be here every single step of the way. Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. So please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.